So, guten Abend. There you go. There. Well, I guess when we leave here, the people who don't speak German yet will leave at least with a few words. So, before I start, let me ask, just by waving your hand, who has been to Germany? I should actually ask who has not been to Germany yet. Okay, a few of them are there. And how many are here from the academia, from universities? Okay, good. Also half a group. All right, really good, really good. Now, my presentation, Being Black in Germany, is actually a part of a book that I'm writing on black identity. And like Wolfgang already explained, I'm actually in business. So international business, everything has to do with business is kind of, I mean, I'm getting excited. But I also understand that learning about foreign cultures and understanding multiculturalism is very important to do business. And that's kind of how it sparked my entire interest on the cultural side. So my book that I actually write is on identity. And my experience living in different countries, I actually compare being black in Germany with being black in the United States, being black in France, even being black in Africa. And kind of compare and look at it, you know, how you perceived as a black person, what are the advantages, disadvantages. And so this is actually my key work. Now what I do today is I kind of wanted to take out a snapshot out of my preparation for that book. So, and there are actually three important points that I want to bring across today. First, the first point I want to talk about is that Afro-German, that's actually some of my research that I came out with, that historically Afro-Germans are socially and culturally disconnected or dislocated from the German society. That's one of my research thesis that I came out with. The other one is African-American identity played an important part to develop an Afro-German identity. And then my third point I want to bring across today is that today, over the last decade, over the last 20 years, Germany has become a very multicultural society where minorities, especially blacks, are more embraced and welcomed. So my objective today of my presentation is, first of all, to inform you a little bit about the African diaspora in Germany, but also to promote Germans' multicultural lifestyle. And this center here is probably the best address to learn more about Germany, its culture, its history, and its presence. But then also I want to spark some interest in learning more about Germany, its history, and its presence. So I divided my presentation into three parts. And, you know, I'm getting really excited about it, and it's a lot of, you know, topics to cover. So I try to really do, to fly through every point so that I kind of cover the entire history. And then at the end of the presentation, I actually want to have an opportunity to communicate with you guys, have a question, answer, and then maybe also comments from you. Because I know there are several individuals in the room who are black and who has been in Germany, who grew up in Germany, who can maybe give a personal account as well. But first I'm going to look at the historical influx of blacks in Germany. And then I will look at the Afro-German identity today, and then if I have time, I'm going to read a few pages of my book draft that I've prepared. Okay? Right. I'm coming down with a little flu, so I need some water once in a while. Good old German, Deutsche Quelle. All right, so let's start. So who thinks, when does the first black move to Germany? Any idea? Year? 1800s, 1900? Any ideas? All right. The first one is the story of Anton William Amo. Well, he was born at the Gulf Coast of Africa, which could be Ghana, but I assume because he ended up dying there. But, you know, one of the countries at the West Coast or the Gold Coast of Africa. And he was born in slavery. And one of the Dutch slave boats gave him as a gift to the Duke of Brunswick-Wolfensbüttel. So he had a 5-year-old boy, an African boy, and said, well, I don't know really what to do with him. Well, let's send him to school, see how he performs there. And he actually passed all his classes in flying colors. Was a great student in high school, went on to university, and actually received his doctorate degree in law, medicine, and philosophy. And he was not only, you know, a successful academia, he was also one of the most prominent professors at the University of Halle and the University of Jena. He started writing a lot of papers on philosophy, and actually he had a different view on freedom, on democracy, and equality, which kind of didn't met the ideas that the Germans had at this time on democracy and liberty. And in addition to that, in that time, a lot of scientists found out, came up with a theory that the black man was the link between the lower apes and the higher apes, the humans, so that the blacks were actually a connection between first of all, the apes, then the blacks, and then the humans. So, in other words, blacks are not real humans. They are just in transition from the ape to a human. So then, of course, he's a human being. He fell in love. There were no black women around, so he fell in love with a white woman, which didn't, come across very well as well with the people there. And he felt really disconnected from the German society, a place where he grew up all his life. And he moved back to Africa, where he died in a slave fort. Now, when you read the story, like I said, if you have time to research this, when you go online and there's a lot of great research out there, what really struck me is that he came as a slave, a 5-year-old slave, to Germany, became one of the most prominent philosophers, and then ended up dying in a slave fort back in Africa. So, but he was probably the first known black person living in Germany. After that, then, Germany started having, followed to create a new Lebensraum, like most of the other European countries, and set out colonies. And Germany actually had 4 main colonies: German East Africa, German Southwest Africa, which is today Namibia, Togo, and Cameroon. Now, compared to other European countries, there were not many colonies, but there were some very historical and significant facts that happened in these colonies. And I will talk a little bit later about Namibia, which is also the birthplace of my father. But there was a genocide. In 1904 to 1908, the Hereros, which is an ethnic group in Namibia, was fighting against the German colonists. And the Germans decided to extinguish all Hereros and kill about 80% of all the Hereros. Now, and it was actually the first written extermination Befehl, order, ever existed on paper. So when the German citizen actually found out about it, they were mad about it. So they actually were against the German government's approach on dealing with Africans in Namibia. But still, 80% of all the heroes died at that point. In Togo, the Germans actually introduced the concentration camp. It was not in World War II. It already started in Togo, where Germans set up concentration camps, which probably was not as advanced and horrible like in World War II, but there were already the idea of exterminating blacks. So then, end of World War I, which now becomes really interesting, I think, when you do your research. Germany lost all the colonies. But not only that, the French people occupied parts of the Rhineland. This is the Rhine right here. And the French troops, they occupied the entire Rhineland, which was part of actually German territory, but now became part of France. And what did the French people do? Well, they sent their troops from Senegal, blacks. Now, they were living there, socializing with most of them were men. They socialized with, white women, and they had a lot of interracial kids. Even through marriage, well, not official marriage. I guess you could call it legal marriage, but also through rape and through just sexual intercourse. And in 1920s, alone 1920s, there were almost 25,000 Afro-Germans living in Germany at that point on that area, I showed here at the Rhine. Here's some pictures that I actually got online from Afro-German kids at that point. But then also we had a big influx of blacks American moving to Germany. And later on I will talk about African-American leaders and prominent figures who actually moved to Germany as well and kind of talked about Germany. Now, but still, so we had a lot of Afro-Germans living in Germany. But then there was another interesting influx of blacks, or kind of presence of blacks, and that was through the so-called Völkerschau, where Germans, not only Germans but also Europeans, set up African villages in zoos. You know, you have the giraffes, monkeys, and then you had an African village setting up there. And these are some actually posters from these African villages. And the Germans argued that most of these people came voluntarily to Germany as type of actors, you know, to kind of present their culture to Germany. But you know, some of my research I found out is that they actually were caught and forced to come there. Now the picture in the middle, these are actually not Africans who came from Africa. These are actually real actors who are the so-called Rhine kids, who were born from French soldiers and white women, and who were living in Germany. And they were hired to work and live in these so-called human villages in Africa. Now let's shift real quick to African-American presence in the United States. And actually, there were a lot of them out there who came to Germany, who wrote a lot of newspaper articles and research in Germany. But I want to pick out two, because they have also a very unique history with Germany, and as you find out later on, you know, something that might not be very, you know, taught and known here in the United States. And one of them is Frederick Douglass. Now, Frederick Douglass, as we all know, was you know, fighting for equality in the United States. He was a very well-written author, and you know, fighting against slavery. And he met in 1956 a woman called Ottile Assing, who was writing for the Morgenblatt in Germany. And she was a half Jew, but she was really interested, or she was really interested to stop slavery in Germany, in the United States, like most Germans who actually were living in the United States. If you look at the abolitionists, most of them were Germans in the United States who were fighting, you know, who wanted to abolish slavery. So there was a big movement in the United States alone from Germans stopping slavery. But she was living in Germany. But she spent most of her life, for about the next 23 years, they met, writing about Frederick Douglass and publishing all her work in Germany to talk about what's going on in the United States with African Americans at that point. Now, like I said, if you have time, if especially students here, if you want to do some research on it, you'll find out that there was actually an affair that they both had for a long time, that she assumed that he's going to move to Germany with her, and they're going to get married and so on and so forth. When his wife passed, and when she passed, he actually remarried someone else, and it became a really love story. And she wrote it down. She wrote a diary that is only available at the university in Germany. And I forgot the name now of the university. Did I write it down somewhere here? Let's see. At the university in Germany. Let's see. Oh yeah, at the University of Münster. It's titled "Love Across Color Lines," and it's by author Maria Dietrich. And she actually has the diary of Ottile Assing, of her relationship with Frederick Douglass, and it's really interesting to read. It's a love story, but it has a lot to do with Afro-German and with the black life in the United States and Germans at that present time. The next one I want to talk about real quick. Again, it's an awesome research topic and an awesome research paper. You know, students can write is W.E.B. Bois, or Du Bois, like the French would say. But he, like most other academics, spent some time in Germany studying. And first time he came was in 1892, where he visited Germany, studied, and then he came back in 1936. And you know a little bit about German history. It was, you know, a different life in 1892 and 1936 in Germany. But when the boys returned to the United States, he looked at the way he was treated by other academics in the United States and in Germany, and he says, blacks living in Germany will have a definitely better life than blacks in the United States at that point. So he wrote a lot of interesting papers, if you read his autobiography, on his life in Germany. But there are two things I want to point out. is the first thing is that he admired Germans' work ethics, especially economy in the 1930s. What Hitler at that point did with the economy, how he motivated the people. But he also spoke out against the treatment of the Jews. And I just want to read a quick quote that he wrote in his book. He said, Hitler, showed Germany a way out when the most Germans saw nothing but a mist. And then he also went on to praise the accomplishment of the Germans. They are domestic peace after generations of war. They have a nation of work after a nightmare of unemployment. Okay, so that was what he talked, the way he talked about Germans at that point. But he also said in the Pittsburgh Couriers that about the way they were treating the Jews, it is an attack on civilization comparable only to such horrors as the Spanish Inquisition and the African slave trade. It sets civilization back 100 years. So he had two different views on Germany. On one hand, he says, Germany is great. We have been treated well there. But the way they're actually treating, Jews at that point is unacceptable. So then Hitler came into power. Again, keep in mind that at that point, there were almost 100,000 blacks living in Germany. Afro-Germans, like Germans with blacks with German nationality, born to a German woman. But so what did Hitler do? The first thing he was doing is he wanted to get rid of the shame, the Rheinschande, the shame of the Rhine. I remember the Afro-Germans who were living at that point. So he captured some of them. And they were sent to concentration camps with other Jews. He actually, 2 books that were written on it that kind of talks a lot about it. But also, so one thing was the Hitler was trying to kill a lot of these blacks living in Germany, but another thing they wanted to do is sterilize them, castrate them, so they cannot reproduce. So, if you think about it, you're at the point in your life, where you're part of a community, and you're not accepted. You want to be part of the community, but you're not accepted, and they even take your strength or the ability away to reproduce. And any psychologists in here, they probably can tell you that it is important. If you're not even part of something, at least you want to have the opportunity to reproduce. And when they take this away, then it's like they take everything from you. Now you have to also see. So you had a black man couldn't reproduce. The only thing they could do is fight for Germany. So a lot of blacks tried or did enlist to the German military, especially when the war was, going through a flip side and Germany was losing. They needed more people. Yeah, come on, jump on. So at least black men in Germany had the right and the ability to fight for Germany, whereas the African woman or Afro-German woman were sterilized and couldn't even fight for Germany, and they were really in a bond. And again, there's a lot of interesting paper written about it. Probably one of the most important and most significant individuals living in that time was Hans J. Massaquoi. Hans J. Massaquoi was born in Hamburg to a Liberian father who was a diplomat from Liberia and a German mother. His father left because of circumstances in Liberia, and he grew up in Hamburg in the 20s and 30s. Now then, the Third Reich happened. Hans was German. Never been to Africa. He spoke a little English, but he was German. So all his friends, well, I'm going to talk about the book in just one second, but in 1949, he immigrated to the United States after searching his ancestors in Liberia. He actually found his father, but he moved to the United States and became chief editor of Ebony magazine, and recently retired and wrote his autobiography, which I actually brought with me. I'm just going to pass it around. So this is actually the American title. This is the German title. The American title is Destined to Witness, and the German title is Neger Neger Schornsteinfeger, which is a song which was sung by kids back in the days to humiliate black kids. And actually the book is about it. I'm just going to pass it around. You just can look through it. There are also some pictures in it. And in 2006, they made a movie of his life. And I'm just going to leave it here with the German Cultural Center whenever you guys decide to show it. And I encourage all of you to come back and watch it. Well, actually, it's in German. Do you show German movies here? Yeah. So what you guys do is you take several German courses, so you get a good level of German, and then you come back and you watch that movie. I'm just going to pass it around as well. Now, I read the book, and for me, the book became very personal, because it kind of mirrored my life, and kind of there was again another inspiration for me to write my book. The book, I actually wrote a book review too, which is online. You just put in my name, and you can Google my name, and then you can find the book review I wrote. But the book has 4 important key points that if you ask some other Afro-Germans who are here today, and I hope they're going to join our conversation later, they are even today you find these same 2 developments of growing up in Germany. So the first one was being different. So as a young child, Hansje Massakoy walked through the streets, and people actually liked him. Little black boy, curly hair, light skin, brown, beautiful. So they came and said, "Oh, let me touch you. Oh, you're so beautiful," and so on and so forth. So he was really liked by everyone, which is great. Creates a great feeling. But then when the Holocaust started, and the Nuremberg laws came into effect, and they said Aryan is, the superior race, everything else is inferior, it was a shift from being popular, from being special, to being inferior. Now, all his friends were white. All his friends joined the Hitler Youth. Well, Hansje Massakoy wanted to join the Hitler Youth as well. And, of course, they didn't let him in. This picture his picture that's on the book and also on the movie on the movie cover is he saw himself on his sweatshirt the swastika. What's it? Swastika in English? Swastika Kreuz, cross. Kreuz. You know what it is. The swastika. He saw it on himself because he wanted to be part of an identity and a culture that wasn't given to him. Then at the end of the war, the Americans came into Germany. And most of the GIs, and I will talk about it in a second as well, were black. Now, suddenly, he had an advantage, because he was black, and everyone thought, he might be American, I don't know. Hans, go talk to the Americans. Talk to them, tell them to give us something to eat, tell them to be nice to us. And he really took advantage of them, because none of the Germans assumed that he was German, so he went on to the military base for free. He could travel on the train for free because they all assumed he was an American soldier. Then the last part of the book, which is even more interesting, is his quest for identity. Where he took off, he said, you know what, I'm done with Germany. Let me find out where I belong to. Where's my home? And he took off. He went all the way to Liberia and actually found his father. Spent some time in Africa, about a few months, but he's not African. Never been to Africa. He's German. So there's a different culture. So for him, even though he was not accepted in Germany as German, he was not African. So for him, it was an important quest to find home. And then he ended up in the United States. Now this book really is unravels that entire quest for identity, and it's really it really takes your mind away. It really takes you into this time where you sit there with him and going through it. And there's one thing I always remember that he said in his book. I wasn't scared of the bombs. I was more scared to go to school and hear all the harassments by my classmates. That's something that hurt me more than the bombs that were coming down from the British that flew over with the airplanes. So it has a lot to say about his life in Germany. But again, we have to understand the time of his life there. Post-World War II, the war ended, and the Americans came and occupied Germany. And as you all know, most of the GIs were blacks. And Jimmy Flinx, a friend of mine, he brought some of his books that he had on that topic, and I'm going to pass it around too, but please make sure I get him back, otherwise I'll get in trouble with him. But there are several books written, just pass around, but there are several books written on this topic too. Now, I read a few of them. I read a few of them, and again, Germany gave you a mixed message. A mixed message came through. Yeah. On one side, especially the book Race After Hitler, which I passed around too. On one side, there was this interview with a member of the Christian Democratic Party in Hesse, and this is what he said, and I quote: "We're deeply hurt that you Americans sent Negroes to Germany in soldiers' uniform. How can you do that? How can Americans do this to us white people? We're not used to see Negroes here. Here in Germany, we are pure white race. To see a Negro shocks us." So that was, one side of the view they had. Again, it was from one of the political parties. But then let's see what the people actually had to say. Well, there were black and white soldiers in Germany. Most of the accounts of the German civilians was that, blacks treated us better. They were not coming here and trying to oppress us or occupy us. They were nice. They treated us nice. They brought us chocolate. They brought us cigarettes. And at that point, food was really rare. And they were really nice to us. Everything they did for us, compared to what the officer did. And for example, in the same book, a German woman reportedly refused to take the laundry of white soldiers if black soldiers were stationed in that area. Because she said, "No, I'm not taking stuff from white soldiers. We prefer taking stuff from black soldiers because they treat us better. They come out, they socialize with us. They don't treat us like less." And also the same book, Germans were confused. They're like, "Hey, hold on a minute. Now, the nation comes into our country, occupies us because we're racist, and they have laws like Jim Crow. There's no equality in their own country, and they're trying to hurt us, and they're trying to occupy us because we do almost similar to what they do." So Germans were really perceptive to blacks at that point. Colin Powell writes in his book, "Black GIs, especially those from the South, for Germany was a breath of freedom. They could go where they wanted, just like other people." So even Colin Powell describes this life in Germany as better or more equal, more accepted than in the United States. So you can imagine, that you had a lot of black soldiers. They were really nicely perceived by whites, civilian, especially by women. That there was also a lot of interracial relations, the so-called brown babies. Now, the brown babies at that point were kids from African-American soldiers and German, kind of European because other countries too, but I'm trying to stay in Germany, and German mothers following World War II. So, and later on, I hope that we can have a discussion, and I hope that some of these children who are here today maybe can talk about their personal account. But most of the officers in Germany at that point were white from the South. So when they found out, this black soldier had a relationship with a white mother, a white woman, let's send him, to a different base. Let's station him somewhere other where this woman is. Wow, they want to get married? Okay, well, thanks. Let me see the file. We're going to work on it in a minute. Then, the file goes all the way on the bottom of the stack. And then if they even found out that the white woman is pregnant, they send the black soldier straight back to America. So there was, again, if you research that online, there's a lot of great sources online. There's a lot of these conscious and intentional separation between these white women, and GI soldiers. Of course, you had a few players who went out there and, just enjoyed life there as well. So later on then, the NAACP wrote an article in the Ebony magazine in the 50s where they say, you know, let's go and adopt these kids. Went to Germany and said, okay, we want to bring these brown babies back to the United States. So some of the NAACP who went over there says, yeah, let's take them back, but you know what? These kids have actually better life in Germany than they would have in the United States due to Jim Crow. And that was all before the 60s movement. So you just leave them here. But some of them were actually adopted at that point. So that was after World War II all the way to the 80s. And then at that point, we didn't really hear anything much, or research hasn't done much about the topic of blacks in Germany until the 1980s. When a book came out called Showing Our Colors, Farbe bekennen. And this book was written by an African-American author, an Afro-German woman, who first started that movement of a black identity in Germany. Now, how did they come up with it? Well, as we'll see in a minute, they actually borrowed that definition from African American. So they said, okay, they're African Americans. They went through a similar struggle we went through. Let's adopt that word and use it in the German language as Afro-German. At that point, there was no word that described blacks in Germany. So you're either German or you're not. But since you're black, you're not really German anyway. So what are Afro-Germans? Well, there's no real definition for it. I guess the best definition that you can find online, because there are different definitions. No one has really copyright a definition for that word. But here's probably the best way to explain it: Afrodeutsche, oder Schwarzdeutsche, or Black Germans, are German-born blacks with one parent African or African-American descent and another parent German descent. Now, I want to also add that Austria, I would count Austria in it too. In addition to that, I also think that we should include blacks who have a black father, black mother, but born into a German culture and only experienced a German culture. So I think that's the best way to explain it. So why do we need a black German identity? That's what people always ask me when I was a kid. Why do you need that? You're German. So why do we need that? Well, over the last 20 years, a lot of research has been done, a lot of theses have been written, and according to several scholars, this is what they said. Okay, Germans view blacks as either lesser or other. And then in regards to nationality, they are excluded historically, culturally, and socially. Cultural dislocation is when people live their lives in someone else's term other than their own. A historical dislocation is people who do not know who they are connected to, so no identity. And a social dislocation is excluded from social life because of their differences. So in other words, there was this dislocation. Now, this dislocation of blacks growing up in Germany is, well, we're not part of Germany, so who are we? Creates an identity crisis. So what created that identity crisis? Now, there are two theses. One is actually I wrote the last one, and the first one I just got from other scholars. It's because we're such a small minority. People really don't care what we think, and people don't really know how to be sensitive to us. So I don't know how to describe you. I mean, there's not a big enough group to actually talk about it. But I came up with I wrote a working paper on it, and my thesis on it is this: there's a flawed and biased information on blacks in media, education, and social life. And what I call it unconscious racism. In other words, I don't personally think over a white spare all Germans are racist. I think there's a form of unconscious racism that still exists today, and I'll talk about it in a minute, but that is transmitted through education in the media. And I wanted to bring a few examples, and then let you make your own decision, make up your mind if it's racist or not. And especially African Americans here would probably agree to that statement. So first one, I want to talk about a famous story called Theyre Stupid, written in 1844, still used today. The Stupid is a boy who experienced certain things in life, creates moral character, and so on and so forth. And these stories are used for educational purposes to raise children. So one story is the story of the ink boy, or ink, Tintenjunge. A black man, as you see in the picture, walks down the street, and two white kids come and tease him for being black. Ink boy, ink boy, ink boy. Santa Claus comes and says, hey, boy, you two kids, stop teasing the black man. It's not his fault that he's black. They kept going. Ink boy, ink boy, ink boy. So what Santa Claus does, he takes the two kids, dip them in an ink jar so that they are also black. So their punishment was to be black. So, you know, as a child, I was like, ooh, I don't want to be mean to someone. I don't want to end up and become black. You know, so some might consider, like I said, make up your own mind if this is racist or not, or like what I call it, unconscious racism, or if this could leave a racist, you know, mindset. Okay? The second thing, German chocolate, best chocolate in the world. If you ever tried German chocolate, best chocolate in the world. This is probably also one of my favorite pieces of chocolate. Anyone knows what the name of this is? Der Negerkuss, a Negro kiss. So you can go to a store and buy a Negerkuss, a Negro kiss. And you know, it's nothing really wrong because nobody means to harm you, right? But then when you're a kid and people come around and say, hey, Nguvi, can I have a Negerkuss? Is that racist? Of course, everyone knows the story of the 10 kleine Negerlein. 10 kleine Negerlein, you all know the same story of 10 little Indians. That's the origin. 10 kleine Negerlein. It's actually a game to help kids to count. So you learn how to count. You have 10 little Negroes doing this, and then something happened. There are 9 little Negroes. Then there are only 8. So everything they do, something happens to them. One dies or is left behind until there's only one. And the last one goes back to Cameroon, where he finds a new wife, has 10 new kids, and goes back to Europe, and all of them die. So that was again, it's an old song, it's an old folk song used back in the days. So you know, because like I said, I'm that nerd on the computer who's like, okay, I want to know more about it. And boom, you can even buy it today on Amazon.com for €9. So it's still available for kids nowadays to use that. Remember I told you earlier about the African villages, the human zoos? 2005, ladies and gentlemen, the African village in Zoo in Augsburg. Is that Augsburg? Yeah, in Augsburger Zoo. You know, and I mean, like I said, is that racism? It's really for educational purposes. You know, you see how African live. You know, you have that little shacks set up. They sit around, you know, fire and maybe sing some African songs. You know, there's actually nothing wrong with it. If you think about it, it's not, I don't think it's intentionally to create an inferior race. But you know what bothers me? Kids. Because this is all they know, right? What do you know about black people? Well, I saw them in the zoo today. So there is this form of what I call unconscious racism. A form of racism that is, you know, transmitted through the entire media, transmitted through education system, transmitted through just cultural life. And that's why this is the example I gave is actually, I have a bunch of examples that I actually present to teachers, to German teachers, kind of to create that type of sensitivity that is lacking, and you know, be more aware of what to teach and how to teach. But what happened now over the last 40 to 60 years, the population of Afro-Germans grew. In the 1980s, we had the book showing our colors, actually put us the first time on paper and created an awareness in Germany. And ever since then, there were a lot of German organizations, like we know in the United States, the NAACP, the Urban League, the United Negro Fund, and so on and so forth, all the churches here, they created organizations that really addresses the importance of being black, or the interest of black people in the United States. Now, I actually had something online, but I couldn't get my online to work here. But there are four important or most known or famous organizations or associations that really concentrate on Afro-Germans. And the first is the Black German Cultural Society, which is an Afro-German organization. It's only online, started in the United States, which is for black Germans in the United States. You can Google it. It's blackgermans.us. And on that website, hey, hold on, actually, I pulled it up. Did I? No, I didn't pull it up. But this website gives you a lot of resources, books, a lot of movies online that talks about Afro-German identity. The second one is probably the first one ever created. It's the Initiative Schwarzer Menschen in Deutschland, the Initiative of Black Germans. And this organization exists since the 1980s. They organize the Black History Month. They organize a lot of forums, a lot of workshops, online and also in person. They have a yearly, annual celebration where people from all around Europe come and join and talk about issues of Afro-Germans at that point. Then we have the Schwarze Frauen in Deutschland, black women in Germany. Again, a group by black women who talk about their issues of being black in Germany. And then Afro TV. It's a Berlin TV station. My sister used to work there. Pretty, very pretty in the family, but she was working there as a reporter, and it's like BT, just more educational. You don't see no rap music on there, and you know it's just an educational program that talks about blackness and African interest all over the world and in Germany. Like I said, write down the names. You can Google them. You can find a lot of information online. You know, thanks to technology today. And you know, really have a good idea what the present life is of blacks in Germany today. So what did Germany do to confront its racist past? If you go to Halle nowadays, you see a big monument of Anton William Amo, the professor that I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation. And Germans understand the importance of mentioning him in German history. If you ever have a chance to go there, like I said, you can also Google his name, find out exactly out where it is. I've never been there. But, you know, they do want to acknowledge him. Another thing that I actually witnessed personally was Germans' response to the Herero genocide. In 2004, I went to Namibia to participate at the 100th commemoration of the Herero genocide that I mentioned happened in Namibia. And thousands of Hereros were there. And the Minister of Economic Cooperation and Development was there, and she gave a speech. And she was talking about how bad it was, but she didn't use the word apology, and she didn't use the word genocide. So all the Hereros started screaming, say, apologize, apologize. Thousands of people just apologize. And then she said this quote that I wrote on here. Everything I said in my speech was an apology for the crimes committed under German colonial rule. The atrocity committed at that time would today be termed genocide, and nowadays a General von Trotha would be persecuted and convicted. General von Trotha was the general who wrote the extermination contract and killed all the heroes. So Germany is kind of accepting its racist past. They're coming out and say, you know, yeah, we did something wrong. Yeah, we killed 80% of the Hereros in Namibia. Yeah, we put blacks into concentration camps. Yeah, there is a lot of racism been done. But we want to change. We want to change. We acknowledge it. We learn from our past. And like I said, it's something really that I've experienced speaking with a lot of Germans, how they say, you know, yeah, we did that. Let's move on. Let's do it right this time. And if you go to Germany nowadays, you see a lot of things that changed in Germany. Go in February, you have a huge Black History Month celebration. If you go on YouTube, you type in Black History Month in Germany, they have a lot of videos, poetry. Yeah, you have a lot of celebrations, what was going on all over Germany, celebrating it. There are a lot of Afro-German culture in media and movies now, positive. There's a show that I just watched on YouTube called Leroy räumt auf. Leroy cleans up. And it's a young boy, probably teenager, Afro-German mixed with a big afro. He's dating a white girl who has 4 skinhead brothers. And they all love him. They all love him. And they want him to become a skinhead. And he's like, yeah, come on, fight with us. You don't have to beat up foreigners. You know, just be part of us because we like you. And he has a friend who's a foreigner. He's, I think, from Italy. So the entire, it's like a series. The entire series talks about, you know, the cultural activities they're going through living in Berlin. That the Italian was more accepted as German than he was, although he was the German and the other guy was the foreigner. Then back in the days, there was a show that I really liked called Ron and Tanya. Anyone remember Ron and Tanya? Ron and Tanya was a show of also a black guy dating a white girl in Germany, and again, the father didn't like him, but then he got to know him, and you know, and it talks a lot about this culture that we don't know much about you. As soon as we got to know about you, you know, you become part of us. Then also we have a lot of Afro-German business that starts. One of them is EasyCo USA Sports. It's an African-American sports store, something similar to Foot Locker, but they have their own gear. Anyone remember LA Gear? They have the OG gear. It's their own mark. I used to work for them for 6 years as a boy, a little teenager. But you know, they have their own mark. They're entrepreneurs. They start selling a lot of sports gear, and it's really one of the true black German businesses in Germany. And then you have a lot of entertainment. The entertainment business is booming. You have also the model industry. Diane Kudua, who currently lives in L.A., was Miss Schleswig-Holstein, which is a district or a state in the north of Germany. And she won the pageant. And she was number 4 in Miss Germany pageant. But I guess Germany wasn't ready at that point to have a black Miss Germany. But you know, you can see that there's a lot of things changing. The so-called quota, you know, like you have in the United States, that, you know, if you have an advertisement, you have to have a certain amount of minorities in your advertisement. You know, you never see really advertisement just whites or just blacks. You always have a mixed group. And this type of quota starts in Germany as well. Germans are starting to understand, hey, we are a multicultural country. Let's target our activities towards a multicultural country. So, now, like I said, what I did in 1998, and Wolfgang read my quick bio earlier, I was on my quest too, my quest for identity, what I call. And I said, okay, I needed to find out where I fit in. I faced and experienced similar racial and discriminative experience like Hans Massakoy did, and like probably most of you did. And for me, it was important really to figure out, you know, where do I belong to. So that spawned my life. I moved to the United States. I came back to Germany, moved to France, went to Africa, went to about 15 countries. And I started writing down about how are black people perceived. And I started putting it in a book. And I thought, okay, let me write a book. Until I found out how difficult it is to write a book. Chapter 1. Okay, once upon a time. So I actually wrote last night. I wanted to put a few things together that is in my book that I just want to share with you. And this is actually about my experience with the United States. How I actually came to the United States and kind of compare, you know, my life in the United States with my life in Germany. I remember that during the weeks of mourning following the death of my father, I came across a poem by Langston Hughes entitled, I Too Sing America. I too sing America. I am the darker brother. They send me to eat in the kitchen when company comes. But I laugh and eat well and grow strong. Tomorrow, I'll be at the table when company comes. Nobody dare to say to me, eat in the kitchen then. Besides, they see how beautiful I am and be ashamed. I too am America. Langston Hughes talked about being part of an inferior American identity in which he overcame many obstacles to be considered equal. I too have felt like an outcast while I was growing up in Germany, where I was overlooked as German. Even though I'm a German national, I never felt home, nor did I feel part of the German culture. It was difficult to identify myself with Germany. My soul was restless. As a result, I left Germany in 1998 on a quest for an identity. Since then, I've been a keen observer of other black cultures in different countries. One reason for our identity crisis is the absence of a black male role model in our lives. Many of my friends grew up without a father figure. Fortunately, my father was around until my teenager years, and he was an important contributor to my upbringing that made me who I am today. My father always told me to be proud of who I am, a descendant of the Herero people who fought bravely against German colonialism in Namibia, who suffered under the German genocide and the apartheid regime. The culture and heritage would confirm of who I am, a beautiful, strong black man. Unfortunately, my father did not witness when I successfully finished a 3-year research into my African heritage. In 2004, I visited Aminos, my father's birthplace in Namibia, where I embraced my African blood family for the first time. For me, my father represented Africa. He was tall, beautiful man, and sometimes intimidating in appearance. He always dressed well and spoke several languages. In the fall of 1992, at the age of 17, I lost my father to a battle with heart diseases. When he passed, I did not only suffer from a loss of a family member, but also my connection to my African identity. During the same week, I also made another important observation. I was flipping through the channels and came across an international NBC broadcasting of the Bayou Classics. The Bayou Classics is a sporting event where 2 famous historical black universities, Grambling State Universities and Southern Universities, were competing in an annual American football game. This event reflected parts of a black culture in the United States, and it seems to me that blacks found a way to create an identity, organize within their identity, and excel in it. I think that's what Langston Hughes described when he talked about the darker brother growing strong. Over the years, I found out more about the African American awareness and important organizations within the black community. Nevertheless, the Bayou Classics became an incentive for me to experience life in the United States as an athlete. I joined an American football team in Berlin where I learned the fundamentals. From 1992 to 1997, I competed in different football leagues throughout Germany. Football became my passion. It gave me a new outlook on life. However, discrimination found me on the football field as well. But this time, discrimination was different. It did not stereotype me from being inferior, but being superior. Many of my peers assumed that since American top athletes are black, I inevitably had to have an advantage in American football as well. I felt this time I should benefit from this racial stereotyping because it finally created an advantage for me. Even though it was a stereotype, I was, in fact, a good athlete. I always have to say that. And put hard work into my athletic development. In 1998, when I received the opportunity to play American football in Missouri, but my life in the United States went far beyond than an athletic career. Over the following 10 years, my quest led me from Germany to the United States, to France, then to Africa, back to Germany, and now to my current residence in Atlanta, Georgia. During the past 10 years, I created an identity that can be described in 2 ways. Who am I and what am I? I consider myself black because around the world, nobody considered me as white. I was put into the position of being the darker brother, but now I'm comfortable in it. I do tell people I'm from Germany or Europe, but in some cases I claim my African heritage as well. I'm not ashamed to be German. My mother is a white German, and she was always a supporting factor in helping me to accomplish my dreams and goals. I've acquired many positive German traits that helped me to get far personally, academically, and professionally. It is evident that life in Germany has become easier for blacks, but racism still exists. Some may argue, well, racism exists in the United States as well, and I agree. Racism exists everywhere. It's been passed, it has passed on ever since we bit in that apple, that fruit of knowledge, at the creation of humankind. Thanks to my international education, I have choices. I can decide where I want to live and what type of form of racism I want to face. For now, I prefer living in the United States, but because of a more tolerant and progressing Germany, I would consider going back to Europe as well. I think that being black and educated gives me more opportunities to prosper in the United States. Also, my relationships with Germans in the United States is better. Here, we both are foreigners. Thus, what we have in common is our German nationality. Here, I'm accepted as the darker brother who is fully equal. All right. So that was... All right, first one.
And I'm going to start it off by asking you one question. You made one remark almost in passing that made me think, though. You said that when you were starting and looking for your identity, some of your friends, and I don't know whether they were black or white people then, and said, why do you need to do that? You're German.
Yeah.
That indicates to me, however, that they just fully accepted you and looked way beyond your skin.
Yeah. His question was that some of my peers was wondering, why am I looking for an identity? And assuming that they might have accepted me fully. And again, I want to point out that my first point I made earlier, not every German is racist. And it's, yeah. And I made sure, and I pointed it out earlier already, but here's an example. Here's an example of what I want to give. When someone asks you where you're from, and you say, hey, I'm from New York, that's it. Nobody asks you more questions. Someone asks me, Nguvi, where are you from? I say, well, I'm from Berlin. No, where are you really from? Spandau? I don't know, where are you really from? Where you mean, the street? Or they always want to locate me somewhere else. They always want to put me into a different culture, different nationality that I'm not. Never been to Africa until 2004. So what I'm going to tell you? I mean, I'm German. I'm from Berlin. So it is true. I'm not. They accepted me, but still, they still had. I wasn't fully accepted. There was still this question of, well, you're not really part of this. I mean, you're German, but I mean, you're not really German. Also, another point I want to make is that some of my friends who said that were actually black. And it's also very interesting in my conversation I have with other Afro-Germans that they say, you know, life in Germany is great. You know, we are accepted here. You know, my brother, totally opposite of me. He would never move to the U.S. So no, it's too racist. You know, and I kind of would think, or I used to think the opposite. So it's really how you perceive it, how you perceive of growing up, how much during your education process you develop the two questions of who am I and what am I. And that's why I really, when I talk about identity, we talk about two different dimensions here of who am I and what am I. And if you both be able to answer it that you are German in both ways, then you feel fully accepted. If you cannot answer the question yourself, you're looking for that identity.
Well, a question like that.
Can you please stand up? That's Jimmy Flinx.
A question like that, when Germans ask you, well, if you're German, I mean, it kind of begs the question why you have to do it. I mean, we're discussing the German history, the culture, and all that, and it's okay to ask those questions, but sometimes the Germans, when they ask you, you're German, well, that's just a national issue. It doesn't talk to your race or to your culture or to your, to your inherent background as a person, as a black person. So it's almost a way to cut off a discussion because maybe they don't want to do that. That's the way I've always seen it.
Okay. Yeah. Next question.
Have a question, but I want to preface it with a story to show that racism sitting in a club room down in Miami at the airport, and I'm watching CNN, and suddenly it shows, of course, boy bitten by black bear in Pennsylvania. And I said, you see there, they just have to mention the damn race. I'm curious, in your time here, have you noticed really much of a change in the racial climate here in the United States?
You know, okay, well, here, the thing is, and probably if you're black, if you're African American, and you go to Germany, you might have a different view about living there as well. Because you always go back. You can always say, well, you know, I'm American anyway. So you have a different, you approach entire life in Germany differently. So for me, it's exactly the same being in the United States. I think that, and I just go deeper in it in my book, but there's a different type of racism here. The best way to explain it is that America accepts the fact that they're racist. That's why you have affirmative action, equal opportunities, employer, and so on and so forth. Something like this. Officially, by law, Germany says we're not racist and you cannot discriminate, but you don't see it that much as fully. So for me coming here, it is, you know, I never really experienced racism here. Just because, several reasons. Just because I'm used to a different type of racism, so I don't really see that as racism. Secondly is a lot of people, you know, say, well, you're not black, you're German. You know, where that's, again, my identity crisis come to place, but in a reverse way. And I think that people also perceive me differently because I'm educated. They can tell me none. So when I meet with them and they see my intellectual, you know, I speak 3 languages, I'm educated, they don't discriminate against me. Like, ooh, he might be smarter than I am. So I might not, you know, touch that subject. So I guess then this is where the race comes out, you know, and they just see me as a person. Yeah. Good. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Can you talk about the roles of blacks going from the transition from the Kaiser to the Weimar to the early days of the Nazis?
Yeah. His question was to kind of look at the black diaspora or the presence of blacks between the Kaiser, the Weimar Republic, then up to the Third Reich, right? Like I said, in this case, I kind of trying to point down, and I'm sorry that I had to fly through it so quick, you know, because there's so much information. It's really hard to put it into an hour or 15 minutes presentation. But I think the key point at that point was the people after World War I, especially after World War I, the Senegalese troops who came to the Rhine area, occupied that Rhine area. There you had the largest influx of black people at that point. Before, it wasn't really there because Germans, they were not involved in any slave trade. They didn't brought no slaves into Germany. So there was really no you know, they had their colonies, but they didn't bring the blacks back to Germany. So there was no really influx. The only thing they knew about it was what they see in these human zoos, what they saw or maybe on paintings and scientifics. But the actually presence of black people started after World War I, when thousands of troops came and then intermingled and created a German identity. Again, you have to understand that these kids who were born there were not Senegalese. Okay? They were Germans. Their father might have been from Senegal, but they were Germans. They didn't speak French or they didn't speak, you know, Wolof. You know, they were just German people. So, and this is where then actually identity began. And like I said, you can actually go. I'm trying to think real quick of a good book. Actually, there's one book that I put up here that talks about called Black Holocaust. It talks about. Let's see real quick. Let me point it out because I like this type of question because that might spark you guys. There's one book here. German's Black Holocaust. That talks a little bit about the colonies all the way up to the Third Reich. And that tells a little bit about the black presence in Germany and how Germans, were dealing with black people at that point.
Could you talk about the official attitudes of the specific governments towards blacks when they supports it? Or?
Well, and it's funny you said it because from an African-American perspective, the scholars who went to Germany, they will tell you that they were perceived as special. They were special. Blacks were treated special. Du Bois, he wrote in his book saying, "Hey, I was treated like a king almost," and he dressed the way he was dressing in his early ages. He wanted to dress like a Kaiser. A lot of ways you see his pictures, he was dressing like close to what's it called, edel person, like a royalty. He was dressing like a royalty because this was how he felt perceived by them. Also, Booker T. Washington, when he spent some time studying internationally, although he had a different view of Germans due to the war, but he appreciated what the Germans did and how you were perceived. And I want to make one more point real quick before I move on here. But when Du Bois was in Germany in 1936, he was really impressed by German work ethics. But and this sometimes, and I've read a lot of papers talked about the contradiction between, especially in 1936, we all know the Olympic Games in Germany when Jesse Owens won all broke all the records and Hitler refused to shake his hand. Well, at that particular moment, Du Bois was not in Germany, in Berlin, so he didn't witness it. So, because you can find a lot of research written about that kind of criticize Du Bois for his, for why he was thinking so greatly about Germany if Hitler didn't even, accept Jesse Owens for his achievements. Yeah. Yeah, it is estimated that over 500,000 blacks died in the concentration camps. 500,000. That would include, I assume, because it's just a number I had, before World War I, the concentration camp they had in Togo. 80,000 blacks died in Namibia. A lot of them died in Togo. And then in this concentration camp in the Third Reich, they estimated in total of 500,000 over a span of 60 years. Yeah, Afro-Germans. That's and then I guess all blacks. Yeah, my figures are for all blacks. Yeah.
Hey, Nguvi, in terms of really the business, finance, and IT industries in Germany, I know we talked about how so much of the affiliations between Afro-Germans and African Americans have been established with respect to sports and the entertainment industry. But from your experiences, have you found that there exists a similar, or I guess I can't really say similar because so many opportunities have come about within the past 10 or so years in the United States as to represent opportunities here where others may not find those available in other parts of the world. But in terms of the industries, more in business settings in Germany, is it really open, or is there really a glass ceiling, or is it just a hard ceiling?
You mean in terms of discrimination and equality?
In terms of actually being able to make a living, a very respectful and legitimate living,
Compared to?
In the business field as compared to the arts and entertainment industry.
Oh, okay. You mean for blacks?
For blacks.
Okay. Well, I don't think blacks you are discriminated against. There's a stereotype that blacks are, good in sports, good singers, and so on and so forth. So when you do music and you're black and you do sports, you might get easier to the game than maybe on the professional side. But I don't think that Germany actually discriminates against, or salary-wise, or just getting a position because you're black. I mean, there's no really way to prove it. I'll give you an example. I came in 2002. I flew to St. Louis. I used to live in St. Louis, and my former pastor lives there, and he's very involved in civil rights. So I had a discussion with him. I said, actually, the United States invites for segregation. Because you can actually pick up every university, go to each website. You know how many black people go to school there, the percentage. So if you don't want to go to a school with a lot of black students, you just, choose the one that only has less than 5%, right? So it's not that type of profiling statistic. Is it not promoting segregation? Because in Germany, it doesn't exist. Today, nobody knows how many blacks live in Germany. Because you don't fill out your census and you have to tell you, are you black or white or whatever. You might have to tell you if you're a foreigner. But since we are no foreigners, it's hard to say. So and he said, yeah, that's right. And he agreed with me. But thanks to this type of profiling, you know how many black people get pulled over, how many black people who are pulled over get a ticket, how many black people didn't go to a certain school and so on and so forth. So you can tell a lot from statistics that doesn't exist in Germany. Okay? Give another quick example, and then I want to keep moving. But in France, for example, you all remember the riots? What was it, 2 years ago, 3 years ago? So they talked about a third-generation immigrant. Now, what is a third-generation immigrant? What is that? I thought when you immigrate, why can't you be? I'm trying to figure that out. What is it? So, you are French. So in France, for example, they say, okay, they're trying to profile you. What they call is a third-generation immigrant. So they put you in one poll and then look at it. But I ask yourself, should we profile? Should we post on the University of Georgia how many black people go to school there? And then we can look it up and see how many black. Or would that invite for racism and discrimination? Or should we just be in Germany where you just don't know? You just go. Yeah. Jimmy, speak up. Can you speak up?
Where they ran cases in the U.S. Justice Department against a lot of state-sponsored state schools of higher education, where there were patterns of discrimination. Part of the solution was to acquire statistics to make sure that there is a distribution of black folks across the spectrum of university life and college life, and it kind of ensured that the kinds of discrimination that took place in previous years won't continue going forward. Now, in Germany, for example, I worked in Germany before I moved here for about 6 years. There are just so few black folks. Truly, I worked in Frankfurt is the business center of Germany. There are some, but there aren't a lot. And so it's very hard to kind of keep track of folks. A lot of them are in the IT sector or banking, what I see. And it's just so few. But, getting there is one thing, and you're right there. I didn't find any discrimination going into jobs. When you're in the job and having to deal with the cultural issues, that's when it becomes a little bit different.
And, again, I have to always, I was, when Jimmy was talking about it, and I tried to think about it, living in France, spending 3 years in France, luckily I have my own business. So I didn't work for someone else. I ran my own business. I called the shots. But I saw a lot of, blacks who didn't perform or didn't move, were not as successful in France as blacks were in Germany. So, then again, I was like, yes.
Now, you said you were from Berlin.
Yeah.
You're black and you're German. Are there parts of Germany where it is better to be than other parts?
Well, if you go down Mike Street, don't turn right. No, I'm just kidding. No, yes, you're right. Actually, and I left it out of my presentation. I gave it in a different presentation. There was an incident happened right before the World Cup 2 years. Was it 2 years ago almost? Yeah, 2 years ago, the World Cup. And a black Afro-German was beaten up by skinheads, and he ended up in a coma. And the government says, hey, he was drunk. The Skinner only hit him once, but he fell because he was drunk. He couldn't keep himself. He fell, hit his head on the ground, and that's why he's in a coma. So, and then that's it. And then there was really nothing. And it was right before the World Cup. So the ISD, the Initiative Schwarzer Deutsche, they sent out a map of the no-go zone for blacks. And they sent it to all these different countries, who were coming to the World Cup, France, England, to the minority groups that exist there, United States and so on and so forth. But I also want to point out that this World Cup in 2006 was so peaceful. And if you see pictures, how everyone, especially the Kudam and unter den Linden and everywhere they were, all the different nations celebrated together, hand in hand. It doesn't matter who played. And it was such a multicultural and peaceful event. But people who are from, the formerly East, at a certain point of time, most of the racism came from that area because of economic situation. The economy wasn't well. They were not used to, a lot of unemployment. And, then they looked into the West, and you see a lot of minorities had good jobs, and they didn't have jobs, so they were trying to find a scapegoat. Then I remember in 1992, it was 1992 when Germany won the World Cup. Was it 1992, 3 and 4? It was really difficult, really difficult times in Germany for being in a minority.
As far as Germany itself goes, though, is it again along economic lines of the parts where they're having more economic difficulties?
Yeah. But you find it in some pockets in different cities too. You never really know. It's not like you have a ghetto and then don't go in there. So it's mostly it's the East Germany, the former East Germany, the way you say, stay out of there. But I've been there, and I haven't never been in any trouble going there. So it's hard to say. Yes, ma'am.
I have a bunch of questions, but one foremost in my mind is I used to work for a company that was based in Vienna, Germany, and we met a lot of people from all over Germany. And my colleagues from Turkey, Greece, Italy, one other country, they all lived in Germany, were born and raised in Germany, and especially a lot of my Turkish friends. And they say, they identified with me in the company because they said, our experience growing up in Germany as a foreigner was just like your experience growing up black and being a black female in the United States. Of course, here's, when I want to learn more about it. And what they told me, from what they experienced, really sounds like they had the same type of experience. So, you're talking about being black in Germany, and I understand that that's what the title of this is, but it seems to me as if a lot of different cultures, the Germans, period, just had, if you were not German, no matter if you were black or whatever you were just not German, you were not from Germany, they all experienced the same type of discrimination. Yeah, they all experienced the same type of discrimination.
There's a truth behind this, and it's a little bit different story with the Turks, because the Turks came after World War II to help rebuilding Germany, the so-called Gastarbeiter. They came to Germany to help rebuild Germany, and so a lot of them came, and they still stayed in that. It was really difficult for them kind of to integrate into a German culture. They became German. Remember, I talked earlier about the third generation immigrant. A lot of Turkish families are the third generation immigrants now, and it was really difficult for them really to integrate into the German culture, and this is where I think a lot of clashed, not just from the German side only, but within the Turkish community. That the Turkish community still grew up with their traditional parents, fathers, but were living in Germany. So they were German tradition at home, living in a Turkish tradition at home in a German culture, and it's really interesting topic too. Looking into the Turks was the largest minority group in Germany, to learn more about it. But I agree, but it's a little bit different background of it, to really understand that. Yes, sir.
My first trip to Germany in the early 70s was before the Berlin Senate to talk about minority relations. Actually, they were talking about Turkish relations, and they complained that these people were rowdy, drunkards, and everything else. And I began to do a little research, and I found that most of them were single males. They were required to live in barracks, they couldn't bring their families in, and that was their problem. I pointed out to them that these people had no rights, they couldn't protest, they couldn't demonstrate or anything anything like that. But interestingly, although I was deeply immersed in that, it never occurred to me to say, well, what about the other folks? What about your blacks and what have you? Yeah. So it was some of those funny kind of experiences I think back to as you told me.
Yeah, and like I said, really good point. But that was in the 70s.
In 1972.
Yeah, and the black Afro-German awareness didn't start until the 1980s, where this, their interest, started to come up. Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's for sure. Just for everybody to hear about. I spent some time in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
The difference, as far as I can see, the difference between Turks and Flinx and blacks in Germany is the difference between people that conceived as threats and people that conceived as pets. So, black people in Germany, black Germans have the status of pets. So, they're cute, especially black women are cute because they're exotic. So you'll find in the daily goings on in Germany that black women tend to be able to get to certain clubs. They tend to be favored for this, that, or the other. Whereas black males are cute to certain, especially the darker they are, the more they are so, to certain white women. But in general, they're not. They don't have the access in society that the cute black women have. All of them put together are not really taken serious because they're not conceived of as a major threat. Also, one of the reasons that is because they don't constitute a community. So that's how I see it, what I see in Germany. As far as the beginning of the black consciousness movement in Germany, again, having been there, Kathi or Montoya actually initially didn't believe that there was any discrimination in Germany when she lived in Heidelberg. And she came in contact with African-American black nationalists and Pan-Africanists who sat her down over months and months and months and months and explained to her exactly what was going on. And when she did that, you can ask her, that's when she came out. And in fact, the whole terminology was worked out with her. Well, what should we call ourselves here in Germany? Well, black Germans, Afro-Germans, black Germans in particular, and it was important for them then to emphasize, for her to create this identity. But the whole identity thing goes back long before Kathi. I mean, it's there's a woman named Marion Koff. I don't know if you know. Marion Koff is a professor at the University of Bielefeld. She worked closely with Audre Lorde and other people like that, and she was born in 1950, something like that. She was a member of an organization that was very semi-popular once in Germany called the Communist League of West Germany. And she's made major contributions to that, already in the 70s, and some other people. But as far as black people in Germany is concerned, as I said, I think the status black folks have over there is as pets, not as, and I don't think they're taken serious today. So that's why you will find black folks often in the entertainment field because it's a cute thing to look at, and so.
Okay, that's really interesting observation, and there's probably a lot of truth behind it, and great. You talked about the book Farbe but what I've seen over the last, especially 10 years, is just talking to my brother as well, is in just observing that, although there is this so-called pet, I like the terminology, the pet terminology. I think there's a lot of blacks even went beyond that now. Or coming now. It's now, I guess, it's a good time for them to come beyond it and trying to step out of their reputation they have, and trying to really to create an identity with these organizations that have been created. And you're right. It's mainly starts in the entertainment industry, but they're trying to use that as a channel to create a more serious topic. And these organizations, there's another one called Our Brothers Keepers, which is created as out of the Initiative Schwarze Deutsche, where they're using the entertainment industry to talk about more serious about their topics. So I think there's a progress coming, and sometimes you have to do it that way.
One last thing, you mentioned that Germany was not involved in the slave trade. That's not exactly correct. One of the largest slave traders in Germany was, I forgot his name now, but he ended up being the richest man in Germany. They rented a bus for him in, I think it was Hamburg or Bremen, and in fact, certain German blacks are trying to get that bus removed.
Oh yeah, I've heard of it. Yeah.
His great-great-grandson, I think, is the head of the Flinx. But he did 2,000 slave voyages in his career alone. So Germany is definitely has been very much involved in the triangle of slave trade.
But if we compare it to England and France, and I've heard,
But it was all they held finance. As I said, he became the equivalent of a multi-billionaire. They've never dealt with that, and even today, the man is being honored. Then again, we're honoring George Washington. So, and time is different. But the thing is, as I said, it's from my experience, having been in Germany sometime, having returned from time to time, having done business over there, Africans, black people, people of German descent have the status of pets.
Okay.
And women.
I would probably dispute that. I mean, I've been in Germany also, and I've lived there a long time. That kind of analogy, I think, takes it to an extreme with all due respect to people. I never saw myself as a pet.
I'm not saying that you see yourself as a pet.
And I never heard anyone really talk about it in that context. I always saw it as a curiosity, perhaps an accident of a historical situation, but not that.
Okay, good. Let's do this. Let's have one more official question, and then we can have a conversation going outside as well. Just one thing to mention also, we have a few Afro-Germans here as well in the room, so you can also actually talk to them personally. We're easy to catch. We are cute, good looking. Last one.
Do you know if there are any black elected officials in Germany?
No, I don't know. It could be, but I don't know. Yeah, probably. Now, one more thing I want to say before I finish up, guys, is especially also to our students here, is it will open up your mind a lot about yourself if you learn a little bit more about being black in a foreign country. This center here is a good place for resources. Even if you want to look for a specific topic, if you want to learn about special things. Actually, some of the books that I just showed around are actually from here. So if you become a member here, I don't know if you have to become a member here in order to get the books, or just stop by and talk to the staff here. Take advantage of the center. You can really learn a lot about Afro-German identity just through the center here alone. All right, guys, thank you very much.